Hi everyone, welcome to today's conversation with myself, Erkan, Ali and Shulagh Jacob. Shulagh's on location out in Bury St Edmunds and I'm at home in Hertfordshire. So today's subject is entrepreneurship and can it change the world? Now this I guess the idea for this came about on our last Beyond Mainstream. We had a social call, didn't we, the other night, and we were having drinks. We're having our first social party, people having drinks and letting their hair down, literally. Shulagh, you actually let your hair down. We got to see the cover.
I did.
and it came over to this idea of entrepreneurship, and I had a little bit of a, I wouldn't say rant, but I kind of went into one towards the end of the evening. I don't know if I left a bit of taste, and then Shulagh and I decided it might be a good opportunity to discuss entrepreneurship and what is it good for? You know, what is it making available? Where are the limits? What do we like about it? Maybe there's other things we really don't like about it. And so it's going to be just a stream of consciousness and a conversation between myself and Shulagh. So do you want to get us started, Shulagh?
Yes, I mean, your rant sent me off on a tangent with my own thinking because I've had my own share of, frustrations and thoughts about the whole entrepreneur thing. I've never even really seen myself as an entrepreneur. I've always been a sole trader, a bit of a lone wolf. And I think a lot of people in my domain tend to think of entrepreneurs as being these kind of scary, money-hungry, profit-seeking menaces almost. But having done a lot of thinking over literally the past 24 hours since we spoke, I came to a rather interesting conclusion, which I'll talk about as we go on.
Great. So for you, it's quite possibly a more relatively new inquiry. For me, this is how I would explain it, is I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. I grew up in a family business. So for me, my early memories as an individual were in a business, in a family business, an entrepreneurial family, and I was entrepreneurial growing up, but before we get down to that experience, what I'd like to share more about is the word entrepreneur is a French word, and it kind of comes from the theatrical world, to undertake, to kind of produce, to kind of manage the resources and produce something, to undertake an endeavor, and I think like a lot of words, they get I wouldn't say even hijacked, but they evolve, they change, and in different worlds, words become, there's an understanding of that word that necessarily isn't the etymology or the actual literal translation of it. And I was using this as an example early on. Anarchy is a really good example of a word that, if you look at the etymology and understand what the word anarchy actually means, is not what most people would consider it to mean. So people think anarchy is rioting in the streets and houses burning and tanks and like this whole kind of like this dystopian chaos. But if you look at the etymology and the root call of the word is to be without leaders, without rulers, not even leaders. And so to me, I consider myself an anarchist, but I'm not going to go around throwing Molotov cocktails at anybody. And I think it's the same with entrepreneurship. I think the word is taken on so much broader understanding in our current societal paradigm that it's not even reflective of what the word actually means. But two, even in understanding of what it is it relevant? Is it relevant? And is it helpful considering what we're dealing with as a society now? And I think that's the thing I wanted to kind of think about. So what did you discover looking just kind of, what do I think about entrepreneurship? And how does it occur to you?
Well, when I started kind of drilling down into what I actually thought, I realized that I was dividing entrepreneurs into kind of three main categories, if you like. There was what I call the sort of profit-centered entrepreneurs. I'll define these a little bit more in a minute. There was what I called cause-centered entrepreneurs, and then those which I put myself in the bracket of more heart-centered entrepreneurs. So profit-centered kind of explains itself really. people who are kind of money driven. It can operate in any industry. Sometimes a person may hop between different industries. I always have an idea of it being like people getting other people to do the grunt work, if you like. Size matters, so it's all about like the optimum size and scale, make things as big and as mass produced as you possibly can. High level connections, huge leverage, success at any cost. And obviously a lot of these people kind of know and work the system because it kind of relies on the system, because it is so money driven, if you like. So we're talking, you know, big corporations, that kind of entrepreneurship.
So you'd link in, funny, I wouldn't personally link entrepreneurship with big corporations. I've always thought of entrepreneurs as owner operators, and then when it gets to the corporate level, it becomes a different
animal.
It's a very different beast, yeah. And it's interesting how we, I would not put me in this category, but how as a society we then admire those so-called entrepreneurs. I think Richard Branson's a good example, and there's others. But then it becomes about, like Stelios with EasyJet. You know, there's this amazing entrepreneur. He had a vision, or her. Who's the body shop lady? I can't remember her name.
Anita Roddick.
Yeah. So there's this kind of lone ranger entrepreneur who had a vision, and they managed to get a, you know, but not a benevolent, but like an investor that bought into the vision, and they're all on this amazing journey to change the way something happens in the world, but they're still playing within the rules of what I would term capitalism and success and resources and benefiting definitely individually, but also a massive cost to, you know, the people that run it, the workers, the suppliers. I think Innocence Drinks was a good example. I think they started off with really great intentions, and suddenly they're owned by, I don't know if it's Coca-Cola or Tesco, and they just get bought up, swallowed up, and they become something very different.
Yeah. So the second category I mentioned was the cause-centered entrepreneurs. And these are basically wanting to fix the world. They see a problem in the world and they want to fix it. And often they try and do that by throwing money at it. Which can work.
They're throwing money at the solution they think is going to change the world.
Exactly.
And I'm quite sceptical of that. Personally. Yeah. We'll come back to that.
And
yeah.
I think your billionaire.
They're still vision or cause driven.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we have to realise is that it's not necessarily always a good cause, although it may be masked as one. It can look as though it's doing good, but isn't necessarily the case. Sometimes it can be about that kind of band-aid solution. And they use the system, but they don't always recognise it as a cause in itself of the problem. Mm. So your billionaire philanthropists may well come into that bracket, or at least some of them. So the third category I defined was the heart-centered entrepreneur, and they tend more to be like your sole traders, your solopreneurs, small businesses, people who tend to start their businesses within the area of a specific passion or their area of genius. They often are driven by specific values. Again, they want to make a difference in the world, but they're limited by the lack of scale that they can achieve. They're not that bothered about the money because they're seeking rewards in other ways, in terms of, you know, maybe validation, maybe they have other definitions of success, and often they're frustrated by the system and view it with a great deal of suspicion. As I say, I would put myself in that category.
So they would maybe consider the system as a barrier to the vision growing, or something they have to a necessary evil. I think we talked about earlier on the call a bit like using the roads. It's out there and you can use it at your discretion or your peril, but it's still a massively used facility, whether that's Facebook or the banking system or the legal system. All of those things are already there as part of a systemic lay of the land. And how much of that can you challenge as an entrepreneur, or even have the will to?
I mean, a lot of business owners, I think, in this sector tend to outsource the stuff they hate doing. I know myself, I can't stand like the admin side or the numbers side, but really understanding that stuff is where a lot of your power can actually lie. But it just takes so much time away from the things that you really, really enjoy doing and the reason you got into this stuff in the first place.
And I think that's where partnerships, collaborations come in quite handy, because you may be a right brain, creative, heart driven, and you partner up with someone who's a left brain, process, numbers driven, and that could make a very good left right brain, very simplistic by the way, a good matching of talents, because the business needs all of that. It's like a free left stall in a lot of ways. You have marketing and sales, you have operations and fulfillment, and then you have administering that business, whether that's hiring, firing, accounting. There's all those things, and we kind of think of it as those three legs. So I want to go on the record in a way, because I've got nothing against entrepreneurs. I grew up as one, and I think there's a valid function for them in society. In other words, orchestrating and undertaking to deliver products and services that are of value, that are ethical, they're as sustainable as we can get them, they make people happy. So if you cut hair or you fix cars or you're an accountant, doing something that gives value to people and takes care of people and has real, like you said, value and culture driven. I mean, they're really, all the entrepreneurial types, they're the ones that I think that are the most attractive to me. And I've worked with a lot of those people. They care about what they do. It has to have integrity. They're always a little bit weird way, because they've got to kind of duck and dive a bit to get through, because it's like being on a little boat. It's just that much more vulnerable to big movements in the world. But they are generally, they're good people with good intentions. And they're endeavouring to be successful, and this is kind of, I can nail it now in terms of COVID era, that they want to be successful in a world that doesn't really want them to be successful. I've known as a small business owner for the last 10, 15 years how much harder, and also working with business owners, how much harder it's got for them to be entrepreneurial and to do the right thing and to produce an ethical product when there are such big corporations, big organizations like Amazon and Tesco's and eBay and all these online and bigger businesses just buying up. They're sucking out the water out of the lake, not leaving a lot for what I would call mom, pa, owner operated type businesses. And they can be quite substantial as business go, but they're not big business. They're SME businesses. And now with COVID-19, there are probably 50% of SME businesses are closed. They're being given money, 80% of furlough money for their staff. They may be open to some grants and some cheap borrowing, but reality is, I think we're going to see a lot of small businesses, I'd say, decimated during this period, not just no longer relevant, but more strangled and become non-existent. And the thing is with that is that's people with families. There's that sign you see every now and again. If you buy from our shop, you help us send our daughter to dancing lessons or buy books or take us, go on holiday. But if you buy from big corporations, you're paying for shareholder profits and bonuses for the CEOs. I think that's something really more relevant now than it's ever been. So absolutely,
because I think I heard this the other day, something like 15,000 pubs were not going to survive, were not going to reopen, and that's a huge shame. And it's going to be to the point where to actually be profitable in the hospitality sector will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, if this social distancing gets taken as far as we think it's going to.
Not just that, but how many people now buy into the narrative there's a virus, it's killing people, I've got to wear a face mask. I mean, would you even want to? I mean, the idea of socialising, and we're a nation of pubs and shops, aren't we, really? England is famous to be a nation of shopkeepers and pubs is a very important fabric of our socialising facilities. You know, we sit in the pub, we talk about things, we see our friends and families and restaurants as well, and that's a whole, you know, even if they do get reopened, what that will even look like.
Yeah, all these perspex screens and that kind of nonsense. And it was like, we had our party call on Saturday night, which I thoroughly enjoyed, but I came away feeling just, it would have been so much better had we all been together in the pub or something. And it made me realise how much I missed that, like real people in a real physical space.
Yeah, and the image I used for it was people arriving at the party and two people just giving each other a cuddle. And I think that physical, is it demonstrative? Is it demonstrative, physically touching people? We like to touch each other. We like to shake hands or give each other a kiss on the cheek, or, you know, whatever that expression is. That is one of the most natural human interactions, and we're being socialised out of that. So go back to the title. Does entrepreneur make a difference, or can it change the world? No, it doesn't. It won't. It won't. It can't. It's not equipped for that. It wasn't designed for that. It wasn't creating small businesses or bringing a product into existence, even if it makes a difference. I'm not saying it doesn't make a difference, but if you're not challenging the monetary system, or you're not challenging the way government works, or you're not challenging the very fabric of how our society works, if you're coming from a causal, consequential point of view, and you're an entrepreneur, you've made some money, and then you go and feed homeless people. I've never been interested in feeding homeless people. I want to stop homeless people being on the streets, and let's look at why is there homeless people. You know, it's like,
so if we start by focusing on what kind of change we actually want, that might be a start.
Yeah. Well, I think
before we even talk about how we get there.
I think one of the things we talked about on our call earlier with the guys was Beyond Mainstream is a great place for us to share knowledge, so people can start to, where I describe it is, you know, see behind the curtain. Because if you're just looking at mainstream news and you're looking at the BBC and ITV and the main broadsheets and the mainstream narrative, and I don't mean just the media, I mean education, how you think of medicine, how you think government, you know, that whole, there's a democracy and we're operating inside that. I would say then you're still at the level of dealing with the effect of it, not looking at the causality. If we're willing to look outside those mainstream views, you'll see that the world might look very different. I think once we as individuals have had the courage to explore beyond the mainstream, then we may see the causality in a different way.
Yeah, I think most people, if they're honest, they don't want more of the same. You know, we're at kind of a crux point now, and we can go down one of two roads. We can either, you know, just put up with whatever's going to happen and try and work within that flawed, damaged, broken system, or we can think to ourselves, well, what do we actually want in its place? And I don't know about you, but for me, something better would look like a world with, you know, freedom, peace, love, abundance, joy, health, all those types of things, something where individuals do matter, something where there's, you know, true equality, where we have opportunities for adventure and experience, a paradigm that nurtures people and the planet instead of destroying it. And we know that within the current model, we're not going to get anywhere near anything that looks remotely like that.
Well, I think I'm with you on everything you said except the first bit. because people often talk about the system being broken. And it's not, I don't think it's broken at all. I think the system's doing exactly what it's designed to do. I think the education system is giving us exactly what the vested interests want as an output. I think our TV, our media, our news is geared up to produce exactly what it's producing. And they've done an incredible job of creating that, and David Icke would call it the postage stamp reality, that reality, that perception that we want, you know, to be able to control, manipulate through fear, through punishment or whatever, keeping people inside certain parameters. So to think of it as broken or not working is not the way I think of it. I think of it as, because of the research and the studying I've done, actually it's doing what it was designed to do. Yeah, and inside those paradigms, but it's just, yeah. I mean, they said, right, everyone, stay at home, don't come out, and we went, okay, tools down, and we just did it. You know, we just did it, and people. I mean, if I fancy a little laugh or a giggle, I go onto LinkedIn and just look at what people are writing, and it's actually, it's kind of cute, but really sad that people have really done no work outside of what, you know, what the mainstream narrative. I've not been on LinkedIn for years. Oh, you'll laugh your ass off. You'll laugh your ass off. So I shall make a point of doing it later. Yeah, it's funny to a point that you kind of go, people actually think this is, and that's the majority of people, and smart, decent people. I mean, not to belittle them, but I guess I am at a level, but I don't mean to. Let me share this image with you, Shulagh. So here's a no, I didn't want one. Hold on, sorry guys, I might edit this out later. So here's an image that I'm taken, and it's from the principles of spiral dynamics. And spiral dynamics is really starting to understand that as a species we are operating within certain paradigms, you know, within certain levels of consciousness. So this is Claire Graves and Don Beck's work. They're academics, and they've looked at how does humanity evolved as a species. And again, this is a model. It's a very well researched. I think it's one that I refer to quite often. So in a time, humanity, when we first started out, you know, as our early versions of humanity, we're in this kind of what they call the survivalistic paradigm. It was all about survival. It was about, you know, food, shelter, warmth, protection, and you did what you had to do to survive. And I think, if we're all honest, we can end up in that way of being in life when, I suppose, the reptilian, the R brain kicks in and just goes into fight or flight, and it's all about live to fight another day. You know, whether you run or you know, at worst you have to go and protect yourself. Then we started to band into groups, and we started to create security through small groups of, you know, tribes. And then out of that, create the energy and the power level, and we started to create bigger societals, and you can start to see that happening. What these do is they go from me to we to me to we. So the first one starts off on the survival is an individualistic kind of personal, then it becomes group, then it becomes personal, very ego driven. A lot of teenage behavior could be seen as energy and power and creating your own independence. And then blue is kind of, think of Victorian era, where we started to have legal systems and governments coming in, and the church or the mosque or the synagogue, and you start to have authority, statism, and kind of the control of the masses through these organizational structures. And then the orange layer is this is what I would call the entrepreneurial layer. It's more about business and capitalism and success. You can think of yuppies and mobile phones, you know, trading shares, and this kind of personal success. The Thatcher years is that kind of orange layer. And they're saying that the green kind of started around the 60s because we sent rockets to the moon, and they turned the camera back and they kind of looked at the Earth and thought, oh my God, we're this tiny little crystal blue ball in the middle of all this darkness. I think kind Carl Sagan does a fantastic piece called the Blue Dot, and we kind of start to see how vulnerable and how insignificant we are in this cosmic vastness. And that's the kind of language that Carl Sagan would use. And then the Green Movement started, and then you can start to see that in the hippies and the kind of, you know, love, free love kind of stuff. And then all of that up to green is called your first tier of consciousness, and then the second tier of consciousness is this yellow, and these are emerging consciousnesses, right? And the one I want to kind of focus on is this kind of turquoise, kind of holistic view of this kind of chaotic system that we're all part of it, we're all in it together, you know, and we are individuals and we're part of the mass. But where entrepreneurship sits is here. So as soon as I hear someone talking about wanting to make a difference to the planet as an entrepreneur, it's within being financially successful, with trying to raise money, within the laws of business, within the banking systems, still within that, very much operating within that system, as opposed to challenging that paradigm. It's operating within it, you know. So I don't know, that's something you've seen before, or
No, I've not seen that model before. It's interesting.
So
go on.
No, I'll hit you with a lot, so I'll just
So going back to the three categories, I started thinking about things a little bit deeper, and I kind of put them on a spectrum. So if you imagine you've got your sort of profit-centered entrepreneurs at one end, and you've got the heart-centered guys and girls on the other end. So obviously when these two models start to go a little bit wrong, people run into problems. And like the main problem we've seen with the profit-centered guys is that you know, money is very much the goal. So it's all about, you know, worshipping money in the system. It creates hierarchies. The system ends up eating itself to a degree. You were talking about, you know, businesses being swallowed up and all that funny money that we've seen being created.
Yeah, if you look at that, what happens is you end up with 5 or 6 newspaper companies, 5 or 6 TV channels, you know, 10 or whatever car companies. And after the depression of the 1930s, 1920s, you used to have hundreds of car companies, hundreds of radio stations, lots of newspapers, and the depression wipes them out, and the bigger groups just buy up what they want for pennies of the pound, and they end up consolidating. That's why I think numbers, you have 4 human beings that have half the global wealth of the planet, because that model just keeps the infinite growth debt-based economy just amalgamates, and they just keep buying out and getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And this next phase, this COVID phase, we're going to see, who knows, right? But probably 50% of SME businesses will disappear and never come back. And I think that's easily said, but I think that's actually quite upsetting.
It upsets me drastically. And for the guys on the other end, you know, the solopreneurs, the heart-centered, value-driven people, you know, they struggle anyway because they're always getting caught in the money for hours trap. They can't scale up, always burning out. And so they end up falling out of love with what they're actually doing. And the other thing I started to think about then was that, you know, I know I've been accused in the past and, you know, very recently as well for, you know, being quite self-centered for following my passions. But really in that kind of field, you do get your best results when you are aligned with yourself and your true personality, if you like. I know for myself, I would quite happily opt out of the system tomorrow if that were at all possible, if I could figure out a way to do it. And obviously our options for doing that are quite limited at the moment, but I certainly would work towards that. And like within this model, we do prize individuality and personal fulfillment, and that tends to be something that falls by the wayside with the profit-centered guys, in that it all becomes about the pursuit of like material possessions. So on the one side, you've got us being self-centered, all about kind of knowing, loving and respecting ourselves and putting ourselves first. On the other side, you've got something that looks like being self-centered, but when you dig down a bit more, you realize that a lot of this stuff has arisen through lack of self-knowledge, because they're putting money first and not the self. So you actually get what I call selfish, in that it looks like something that's self-centered, but it isn't. It's born of self-loathing and actually an imitation of being self-centered. I think I made sense there.
I think you did. I think you did. I wanted to kind of keep it away from personality types, because I wanted to kind of think about the notion of entrepreneurship, as opposed to, because inside of that you've got individuals, and individuals have, you know, there's a spectrum of different abilities and skills, and you can start grouping up the type of entrepreneur. And I didn't want to go down that route so much, but this idea of, can entrepreneurs really change the world? And I think we're now in a phase of fighting literally for our freedom and our liberty.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
In a time of fighting for liberties and freedoms, entrepreneurship is almost, if you look at that scale, we're now needing to create a new consciousness in the species. And yeah, we still need people to make products and sell stuff, you know, haircuts and, you know, but that's not going to change. I don't think that's going to change the world. However, and I've heard this term quite a lot, and I don't like it as a term, but the more enlightened we are, whether we're entrepreneurs or we're professionals or we're part of government or whatever it is we're doing, the more enlightened we are, we're all contributing to the escrow, to the overall outcome. Because there is an argument that says the world that we've got is a manifestation of all our intentions. You know, and right now, the intentions that we've got as a species is exactly what we've got, is exactly what we deserve, or is exactly what we've called for, you know? So as we create that higher sense of enlightenment, a higher level of paradigm, then the causality, i.e. the actions that we put into place, pull for the new world that we want. So first of all, it's a level of understanding that there's a problem, diagnosing that, and then the actions that best transform that or reinvent it, you know? Because we're not in the Stone Age anymore. We're not running around like marauding tribes. You know, there's a lot of things we've outgrown. We've grown up as a species. And what I think this new phase is going to call for is a new human being, a new, I think there's got to be a freedom fighter in all of us, you know. And I did post something earlier on that was a picture of a kind of you know, like a red Indian sitting bull, said, if we must die, we die defending our rights. And I think if you're there totally engrossed in your entrepreneurial endeavor, that's not fighting for your rights, although it's a valid activity, making great pizzas or building a, you know, like an ethical, heart-centered business. Fantastic. But we are having rights being stripped away, new laws come in, and there's things going on that we could be seriously looking down a barrel of new vaccines, you know, universal basic income, the write-off of probably 50% or more of our, you know, family home assets, our businesses disappearing. So to think entrepreneurship's going to sort that, I think people need to really wake up.
Yeah, we need something to happen, and we need it to happen pretty damn quick.
Yeah.
So I kind of extended the model even further, because again, what I realized was the product of the profit-centered model was, you know, everything being industrial, mass-produced, no care for people of the planet, that kind of thing, worker bees, meaningless jobs. And then on the other side, we've got...
Not just meaningless jobs, but bullshit jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, how many jobs are out there that really don't need to exist at all? We don't need them. They're just almost created for the sake of it. And if we get rid of those and we focus on what's, back to basics of what we need to, there's enough food and clothing and basics for everyone. And we'd have time to be with each other and do things together. Sorry, I did interrupt you.
That's all right. And then on the other side, we've got individual freedom. We've got, care, acceptance and connection, and people who actually genuinely do want to make a real difference. People living their purpose, and people who are actually quite flexible in creating like bespoke solutions for individual problems. A lot of small businesses, they might work in the same field, but they don't necessarily look the same by any stretch of the imagination. And the weird thing was, and this only came to me about a couple of hours ago, I was sitting here and thinking, well, actually, although these two things are like poles apart and like completely polarized, there is a natural symbiosis between the two, in that both sides need each other's solutions in a way. People like myself would benefit a lot from just having a better understanding of how to scale solutions and finance, if you want to work within that model, or if you want to create something completely new. And then I found within my business that I tend to attract as clients people who are burnt out from working within that profit-driven model, and having worked up to a certain level of success within that model, they're actually looking for bespoke solutions. So that started to interest me a bit, that there was this kind of need for each other almost.
I think you're kind of going back to, say, the profile of individuals and where maybe our strengths are as individuals, left, right. This is a very basic way of putting it. But I think also if we look at money as a cult, especially the current money model, money created out of nothing by private businesses, loaned at interest, it's a burnout model. And whether we like it or not, we're constantly judging, evaluating ourselves and the people around us on their ability to hoard money or to collect money. And we're living in a money cult paradigm. And I think if we transcend that, and we've had societies, very successful societies over the over the millennia of human existence, where the current money system, there's a really good book, I think it's 5,000 Years of Debt. And it was talking about how money has evolved and changed, how you have debt jubilees in certain societies where they just write off debt. And in fact, in Islam, usury, i.e. charging interest, and I'm going somewhere with this, is haram. It's not a good thing, because every pound or sterling or dollar that's brought into existence as a fiat made up currency comes with a certain amount of debt attached to it. So the reason we have to keep growing and GDP, and we need to be bigger this next year than we are this year and the year after that, is to continually to pay off the drain of interest on the money system, because that money gets brought into circulation and then you've got to service that debt. So where did all the time go? If all you had to do is produce enough for you and your family, and everyone could do that, and the surplus could be communally shared, we've got everything we need within very small communities. You don't need that much. And if you look at very poor communities, they don't have anything in terms of physical assets, but they have their lives, they have time.
I think it's one thing people have realised through lockdown is that they didn't place nearly enough value on time and like the quality of life at all.
That's the biggest thing we've been robbed of, is that time to be with ourselves and with our families, and I don't know, learn to paint, learn to write, learn a musical instrument, or do something that enhances your life, rather than a bigger house, another car, more car payments, road tax going up every year, and all those things that are happening all the time. They are constantly draining, that is being taken away from us as a life force. And there's a fantastic lady by the name of Catherine Austin Fitz, and she's done an interview with a guy called Richard Dolan, yeah, and Richard Dolan and her are having this conversation. So going back to Catherine Austin Fitz, right, and Catherine Austin Fitz, part of George W. Bush Jr.'s, I think senior's government under housing. Anyway, so she kind of had this epiphany, set up her own investment company, came away from government, and she asked some of her people to do some number crunching. She said, how wealthy would a society or a town be if we took away all the externalities like interest, tax, wars, paying for a government system? You know, if you just let that society keep its wealth and what it creates, how much more wealthy would it be? Right? So they went away, they crunched the numbers, and they came back, and she said, that can't be right, go back and do it again. And then they came back, no, that can't be right, do it again. She said, okay, leave it, I'll do it. And she went away, she came back, and think of a town or a small, you know, a small town would be 1,000 times more wealthy. So we already produce so much abundance, but then it gets all sucked up and it ends up in the hands of very few, and the very many end up without those assets and those resources. So if entrepreneurs can better flatten that curve, like SME owned operated businesses, where it doesn't all get sucked up to the top, then entrepreneurs are great. But if we're not challenging the very mechanism that's sucking all that wealth up and out, then entrepreneurs are actually not very, they're going to prove they're not that useful after all, because they're not changing the system, they're operating within it.
Yeah.
I think
that was kind of what I was sort of getting at, in that, you know, the profit-centered guys, they need the system, and even the cause-centered guys, they use the system a lot of the time to kind of impose their solutions on the world, even if the world doesn't want it. Yeah.
And that can come through, I mean, you see built-in obsolescence, you see new models coming out for the sake of it, rather than just make a product that lasts a long time, that's reliable, and people could buy one of those for 10 years. No, you've got to have 5, 6, you know, and all of that kind of, that way of thinking to get people to buy your product. I don't think that's sustainable thinking. That's where a lot of entrepreneurs are at. How to market, how to get people to come in to your store or your online shop as many times as possible, to how do you get them to upsell, cross-sell. And I think that has got to go. I think all that money, you can't keep leaning to the planet's resources and just stripping away everything that's there to be taken, because then you end up with where we are. We're running our planet, we're drawing 4 times the carrying capacity of the planet every year from what the planet has. So there's going to come a point where there's going to be no fish in the sea, there's going to be no trees in the forest, there's going to be no, you know, how long can you do that for? And we're burning out that system at a phenomenal rate. So whether it was COVID-19 or whatever, this party was coming to an end, and the hangover is only just setting it in.
I often wonder what a world would look like without money.
Yeah.
It's kind of a naive way of thinking about it, but
I think that's a great way to think about it. I think that really is. I mean, you know, in true collaboration, and we organise our society in a scientific way that benefits everyone. We've already got the drugs or medicines or supplements, they're all there. We've got cures for cancer, but then we've got the Cancer Act. It doesn't let you use anything other than radium and chemotherapy to treat cancer. So it's embedded in the laws, but it's also embedded in the cultures, because people then go, oh, I've got cancer, then they go to the hospital for these treatments that are actually protecting the radium industry. You know, so that to me is, if you're not dealing with those, if you want to create a product that can cure people of cancer, you're going to get shut down.
Yeah, I mean, one of the scariest things for me since this whole crisis started was realizing how much the holistic health guys were being censored, that was when it really started to hit home. These people who, you know, it was always the first thing you thought of if ever you got a cold. It was like, oh, stock up on vitamin C, like drink loads of orange juice and get in those citrus fruits.
Yeah.
Now anyone who says that on Facebook is like, the video's deleted straight away, and you think
it's been fact checked.
Yeah.
You know, or channels. I mean, I've been listening to some people that I've been listening to for years. They're now saying we can't really talk about that more because we'll probably lose the channel. And that's just talk about things like magnesium and vitamin C or GC math. I mean, GC math's another example. David Noakes recently has just been arrested and he's been taken to France. You know, and if you don't know who that is, immunobiotech, and he was basically treating people with cancer and all sorts of other conditions with a human protein that's in your body right now called GC math. So, see, this is the thing. I think entrepreneurs can be really, entrepreneurial skills are great skills. I think, but if we're not also freedom fighters, there'll be nothing for the entrepreneur to do. If we're not standing for justice and standing for has integrity and what has morality behind it, and started to expose the corruption and the way the system is keeping things the way they are, we've got everything we need. There's more than enough for everyone. So that's kind of where I stand on it.
Yeah, for me, it's very much about, I think, getting people to sort of check in with their own values and look at how all those things are being compromised right now, and being ready to, you know, literally fight for freedom. Mark Passio was talking about like the priorities of this. You know, it's not life that comes first, it's freedom. And you have to be that in love with freedom to even stand a chance of bringing it back.
Well, if you can't see the bars, you know, none so deaf as those who aren't here. Is if you don't see that there's an issue there, then how if you can't even see the problem, that's the first thing. Then there's a whole different level of understanding that needs to be made aware of, maybe, or to start to be conscious of. And I think that's where for me, that's where I'm at. I mean, entrepreneurship has its place. It's a good group of skills, a good mindset to have. But, you know, in the world of freedoms being eroded, and, you know, it's not going to be that helpful. We need another level, you know, going up the scale in that consciousness. We need to go beyond green, beyond yellow, and start to think of us as a holistic, individual, collective, having this human experience and having the courage to stand up for what is moral and has integrity, and call it out. And I think that's going to make the difference. So we've come to a kind of good conclusion, haven't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been an interesting discussion as always.
Yeah, so I think we've been over. I don't know how long we've been. We've been around 40 minutes or something. So yeah, so that's anything else you want to say?
It's been longer than that.
Anything else you want to add to that?
I just wanted to reinforce what you were saying about stepping up, because I think everyone has to step up their game on a monumental level if we're going to survive this. And, you know, I've done it kind of myself on a sort of very small micro level, but I think, you know, we do need to connect with bigger fish in order to get a level of activism going, and, you know, then just maybe we can change something.
Well, I think what I take solace in is, if we're all manifesting this, then let's start manifesting something else. You know, we could probably turn it around on a dime if you know the 100th monkey effect, or, you know, if you think about that, we're all consciousness energy on the planet, and you get over the five senses reality, you start connecting to a higher sense of what's possible, and you eliminate fear. You don't really care what people think, what they're going to say, or, you know, I think that's the biggest controller of a human being, is this fear. You know, there is an argument, there's only love and fear, so you're either going one way or you're going the other. And I think the more we can practice in fear, in love, and connect to our higher sense of purpose and take the action, because I don't think it's just a matter of meditating and sitting there, although there's a lot of people that do that, and I'm sure it's very valid. Somewhere we need to engage with the reality, and do stuff that evolves things, or at the very least say, no, I will not tolerate that. I'm not going to have that injection. I'm not going to be held to social distancing. I'm not going to go to a pub and be 1 meter apart and walk around and follow the arrows. I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
The less we acquiesce and the more we stand for something, the better the chance we have. So
yeah, I think as well.
Thank you for taking time, because we could go on, couldn't we?
Oh, I could go on for another
hour
probably.
Maybe we'll include a couple of others on these calls next one. But thank you, Shulagh. I really enjoy these chances to discuss these subjects. So everyone, if you're watching this, subscribe, like our channel, subscribe to our channel, share it with others if you think it's of value. Comment, give us some feedback. What did you like? What don't you like? We can take both sides of that. We're open to that. We all have opinions. Any last words for you, Shulagh?
None other than get yourselves on the Beyond Mainstream platform and out of the Facebook group, because there's loads more stuff in there, all under convenient topics. And yeah, that's it really.
Okay, so from me and Shulagh, thank you for joining us. Take care. We look forward to our next episode coming soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.